Hi, I'm Louise Best. I'm Group Embryology Support and Improvement Lead for the Care Fertility Group in the UK. I'm just going to talk to you today about our experience about installing the RI Witness system within our group of clinics. I'm going to talk a little bit about the considerations that you might want to think about when you're choosing a witness system. A bit specifically about the RI Witness system, I'll talk about the pre-installation process, but then also the installation process, the validation, and then a little bit about future operational considerations and development ideas. So Care Fertility are a group of private clinics within the UK and Ireland, and we already have RI Witness installed in some of our clinics. We were lucky enough to have to acquire Chester and Bath, who already had the RI Witness system, and when we opened the Birmingham clinic we were trialling the RI Witness system and decided to adopt it in all the clinics. So far we've installed it in the clinics that are circled here, and we've still got 4 more installations to go. So yeah, we're well on the way to having it throughout the whole group. I think I've got enough experience now to be able to tell you about a little bit about what the process is and how it impacts the clinic. So fortunately I didn't have to make this decision alone. We are lucky enough within the Care Fertility Group to have focus groups for different interests that we have within the group, and I chair the witnessing focus group, which also covers traceability, and we were able to get somebody from each of the clinics to meet in a group, and these were the things that we were looking at when we were looking at which electronic witnessing system to go with. So obviously you want something that's going to be easy to use, and as a group we have about 50 or more embryologists within the group now, so the training was a big consideration. We had to be sure that we weren't introducing something that was going to be the training on it was going to be so time consuming it wasn't going to be feasible. We also wanted to make sure that the witnessing system included some kind of traceability and stock control element to it. That was quite important to us. The installation process, obviously with us having a large group of clinics, we're up to 12 clinics now, so we wanted it to be a fairly simple process with not too much additional expense with extra equipment or other things that were going to be needed. There was also the patient information and the patient acceptance of the electronic witnessing system to consider. The reliability, customer services, the consumables, that's the same with any process that you introduce into the lab. Those are key things that you want to look at. We also wanted to be able to develop things that perhaps we were more interested in within the Care Fertility Group. We always have research and studies going on, and we wanted to be able to introduce new features. We wanted to have the flexibility to introduce new features to the system. We also were keen to have a reliable and easy freezing and thaw tracking element to the witnessing system, which also links into other projects that we're looking at. And obviously, like any witnessing system, you want it to be easy to audit. You don't want it to be too odious on the lab managers having to look through to find if there have been any witness steps that were missing or any issues that have been in the lab. So I'm not going to go in too much into the RI Witness system in how it works, but just in case people are not familiar with the system, it's based on an RFID tag that attaches to the dish or the tube or the pot, so to any of the items, and the work area becomes a tag reader. So you can either have an integrated tag reader within the work area, within your flow hood, or you can have a retrofitted tag reader which sits on the workstation. And then associated with that are the tablets that give you the information about what the tag reader is reading, and obviously gives you visual and audible alarms if there's any mismatches, or there's any items that aren't tagged, or if there's any items that are removed from the work area that haven't been tagged. So it's just a little overview. It also has the cryo labels, which are barcodes, and the barcode readers link with the tag readers, so it's all flows right from the beginning, the entry point into the system, and flows right through to the freezing process and then onto the thawing process as well. This was a very interesting feature for us of the RI witnessing system. You can actually track your embryos within the system. So each of the barcodes has a number that relates to, for example, the embryo number, and you can identify from the barcode, for example, the embryo number that you're thawing. And this is really interesting for us in terms of our pre-genetic diagnosis and program that we have in the lab. So just to talk a little bit about the system of installation, the very first process is the site visit and coming up with a site-specific proposal. So this involves a visit to the lab, and they look at each of the work areas and work out what you do at each of the work areas and what equipment you'll need to have at each of those work areas. And this is a really important part of the process. And I think if you spend a lot of time at this point working out what happens where and getting the right equipment in each of your work areas, it really makes things a lot smoother for the installation and the use of it afterwards. And part of that process is deciding, obviously, if you want to buy a new hood that has an integrated reader, or whether you want to have the retrofit plates which sit on your existing worktops. Obviously, these are heated plates, and so you would switch off the heated surface within your flow hood, for example, but they're, very easy to install, very reliable, really nice. You'll see in one of the later slides, really good heated surface, really controllable. And it also means if you've maybe got a hood where you've got patches of heat and cold within your work area, it completely replaces the heated element of your flow hood. Also, part of the consideration is where to put the tablets. I really like the microscope mounted tablets. I think it's really nice to have the tablet within the view of the operator, so they can see exactly what tags are reading within the work area. They can see any alerts, and it's really simple to use and really not very invasive for the user. But also you can have the tablet freestanding or attached to the outside of your flow hood. I know quite a lot of our work areas, we have decided to just put the tablets where we've had them before, because you're used to looking at that place. But it's a really good chance to have a think about how you use your work areas and get the tablets right for you. So there's different types of tags that you can put on your dishes or on your pots. And again, as part of the pre-installation visit, the Cooper expert will go through the different types of tags, look at the sort of dishes that you're using and recommend what they think is best for you. But certainly as a care group, we try to keep things simple and just minimise the different types of tags that we use. So yeah, onto the installation process. So all your hardware will arrive, and we have an engineer that comes along, and quite a simple, you'd think, procedure for installing all the equipment. I'd say it's quite disruptive for the lab in terms of workstations being out of use and engineers being in the lab and the teaching element that's going on at the same time. And I have to say, the engineer that we had that's shown here, I haven't shown his face because he's our engineer, and he's done a really good job. We've really appreciated that he's understood what's going on in the lab. He's tried to keep out of the way, but he's also done his absolute best to make sure that all the wires are out of the way, the work surfaces still remain cleanable, there's not wires on the work area where you want to clean, and just kept it, sort of tried to keep himself contained to one work area at a time, and tried to be mindful of the workflow that's going on in the lab. I'd say that just as a guide to how long the installation takes, I would say about half a day per work area. Sometimes they're quicker than that, and obviously if fortunately, when we went to one of our clinics, we were able to completely clear the diary in the lab. There wasn't any procedures going on that day, so the engineers could just get in and just spread themselves out and really work a lot faster. But I would say if you're trying to do the installation as part of a working lab, I would allow half a day per work area. For the andrology areas, maybe not so much, but just as a ballpark, so you kind of know what to expect. But they certainly do their best to make sure that all the wires are out of the way and tidied up really nicely. This is a photograph of one of the integrated hoods that we had fitted in our Nottingham clinic with the microscope mounted tablet, and you can see at the end, once everything's installed, it's a really nice, neat finish for the lab. This is one of the double hoods in our Tunbridge Wells clinic, where we had, again, the microscope mounted tablets, but these are the retrofit heated plates, the tag reader plates. So you can see that there's slightly more wires just tucked away, but a really nice, neat job, and obviously as tidy as it can be. So yeah, this is a photograph that I sent to one of the lab managers after the installation week. And I feel like when you go in, you feel calm, you feel organised, you feel like everything is in place. But by the end of the week, it's an exhausting week. You've got your staff to train, you've got, you know, the traceability to work out, you've got to get all your consumables in, you've got all your workstations to get in and validate, and it's an intense week. I'm not going to lie. It's do preparation beforehand, but it's still an intense week, and you've just got to follow your plan and get through it. And it's exhausting, but it's really worth it at the end of the day. This is just a little bit about the validation. Each of the heated plates have 5 discrete areas of heat element, so you can control each of the sections within the work area separately. So we use the thermo buttons for our temperature mapping, and you can see this is one of the workstations that we were validating. So yeah, this was just an example to show you that we had a flow hood that was particularly old, and we get it in all of the work hoods, but sometimes you've got patches where it's a bit cooler, and it's always a bit of a compromise trying to get the perfect temperature across the work area. But you can see on the left-hand side, this was the validation that we did from the temperature mapping from the work area that I showed you previously. And you can see you can alter each of the heated elements within the work area separately. So you can get all of the heated elements to exactly the right temperature. So the whole of the work area is usable space. So part of the installation is developing your process map. This looks quite daunting, but the specialists help you through it. They look at your SOPs, they look at how you work, and they help you to build up this diagram of witness points leading you from one process to the next. It looks quite daunting, but when you break it down and you start building it up, it's actually really good fun. And I personally really enjoy building it up, and I really enjoy having a little tweak with it and adding extra bits. You can add, for example, questions that come up at different witness points, or you can add a double electronic witness. For example, when you're doing the dish check at embryo transfer, you can have the doctor do an electronic witness that he's checked the dish, the name on the dish. There's other bits and pieces that you can add in to make it exactly how you want the flow of witnessing to go through the lab. This is just a tiny bit of that process map, just so you can see how it's broken down. It's really quite straightforward once you start building it up, and you can see here, going from the sperm pot that's doubly witnessed, that's an entry point, so you doubly witness the details on the sperm pot, but then the sperm pot leads to either a gradient or a sperm wash, and then onto a final prep or onto a sperm freeze, and then into the straws. So you just gradually build it up, little piece by piece. And we didn't get it right in the first place. We didn't get all of the processes in. We, would come up with something that we hadn't thought about when we did the process map, but it's super easy just to go into the manager software and make a little adaptation, and then it goes live straight away. So it's really quite good fun once you get started on it. One thing I would just mention that I forgot to mention earlier is I would get your IT team on board as soon as possible. We have our own custom IT system within Care Fertility. We have our own patient data management system. So integrating the RI Witness system with our own system was, I guess, quite a challenge for IT, but get them on board as soon as possible and get that integration. So it's pushing your patients from your database into RI Witness. And then we're trying to, once all the installations are done, we will be pushing the reports that are generated from RI Witness back into our system to be stored on the patient's records. So yeah, I just forgot to mention it earlier, but yeah, get your IT systems, your IT team on board. So yeah, just a little bit about the operational considerations. I would say the training has been perhaps the biggest challenge to us. I think we've got a lot of clinics, busy clinics, and we've got a lot of staff, and certainly what I've learned from this process is everybody has their own way of learning. Some people like hands-on, they just like to be left alone with the system and have a play around. Some people like to be sat with and told and talked through it. Some people like to read the SOP and like to read the manuals and read how it works. Some people like to watch videos and they like to go away and watch the videos themselves. And all of those resources are available to you, and I would certainly say to take advantage of all of those resources. It's been I'd say one of the biggest challenges is actually getting the staff trained on the system. Not that it's a hard system, it's once you've learned how to use it, it's super easy to log on and go through the witnessing process. But the initial kind of introducing the system to your staff is, I'd just say, just take a little bit of time to think about. But all the Cooper staff are really helpful in helping with that training. So yeah, there's training for your basic users, but there's also the advanced training for perhaps the practitioners that are helping with your traceability and your stock control, but also, as I mentioned before, with that process map, building up that process map and generating reports and looking at the analytics. They're all kind of advanced training things that you need to think about. The traceability is great. I mean, it's perfectly workable. I'm going to be honest, it's not, for us, it's not, we'd like it to be a little bit better. And I think on one of my slides later, I'll show you the pathway that Cooper have got for developing the traceability. We've certainly given them some of our thoughts about how it can be improved. And I think it can just be a little bit better. It's certainly compliant with the HF in the UK, the HFEA regulations on what needs to be recorded, but it would just be nice to just be a little bit more process specific. But the way we have it set up, it isn't at the moment. It can be better than we use it, but at the moment, yeah, it's fine, but it's going to get better. So patient information documents, these are, again, with some of our clinics, they give all the patients information about the electronic witnessing. Some clinics just have it available for patients if they ask about it and they want to know more information about it. That's entirely obviously up to your clinic, but it's just something to think about when you're doing the installation and you sort of get into the end and you're putting it into use. There's different reports that you can look at, obviously the witnessing reports, the traceability reports. There's also a mismatch and an admin assign report that obviously you want to keep looking at, you want to keep auditing. It might be with the admin assign reports, it might be that your process map isn't quite suiting the way people are using the system in the lab, and that your process map needs to be tweaked a little bit so that people don't have to skip steps or repeat steps. Certainly within the care fertility group, we work as a standard process. All our consumables are the same, all our media is the same, all our SOPs are the same. So we wanted a standardisation of the witnessing system between our clinics. And that again has been a big challenge as well. You can imagine we all work the same, to the same SOPs. You would think everything would be the same, but to get a standardised process map into all the clinics, even as far as right back at the beginning when we met first as a focus group, even calling dishes the same things, whether you call it a post-denudation dish or you call it a pre-ICSI dish, even things down to that level, we're trying to standardise so that we can move between clinics and you're expecting to see the same thing at each clinic. So right down to the small details, it's really nice now to be able to have a standard process map and to be installing that in all of our clinics. There's obviously a few little changes between the larger labs and the smaller labs, just in terms of, for example, weekend working and lone working perhaps. So, you know, there's always going to be a slight adaptation to something, but I think we've got to a really good place with our standardisation now. And obviously one of the considerations is just making sure that you've got a good supply of all your consumables, your tags and your Brady labels for your cryo straws, and you know, the ribbon for your printer and things like that. It's just getting used to the new sort of consumables that you need to get in your standing order. So yeah, I'm just digress a little bit, just as I was thinking about this talk, I happened to be listening. Obviously, as part of my job, I do a lot of driving, and I like to listen to podcasts as I'm driving in the car. And there was a podcast came on as I was thinking about this talk, highly recommended. It's called Cautionary Tales. It's Tim Hartford, and I would definitely look it up. It's really quite interesting topics that he touches on. And this particular podcast was, obviously this is Emma Stone, who won an Oscar for Best Actress. And I'm sure you will have all seen at the Oscars, she came on, won her award, and as she left the stage, the person who gives out the envelopes to the next person that's presented that's coming up onto the stage took a photograph of her with her Oscar as she left the stage. So he's busy tweeting away as as Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway are coming up on the stage to give the award for the best picture. And he's distracted by tweeting and hands the wrong card to them, the wrong envelope, as they go on the stage. And I'm sure you all remember it from a few years ago. It resulted in them reading out the wrong name for Best Picture. And as I was thinking, it reminded me of installing the RI Witness system, strangely enough. I was just thinking, as I was listening to the podcast, it's a really good example of a really simple system being made way too complicated, and having unnecessary complexity in a system leads to, poor design and a failure to understand the system and confusing communication, and all these things can lead up to errors being made. Nobody comes in the morning wanting to make a mistake, wanting, not thinking they're going to witness correctly. But I think if you just keep your system simple, and obviously when there's always something happens and it's always user error, it's always the pilot's fault, but actually sometimes it is just the system. The system's been made too complicated, it's not been communicated properly, and so it just reminded me of the installation process for the RI Witness system. Just keep it simple. It's a really good, straightforward system. You just need to keep it simple, make your communication clear, make your SOPs clear, and hopefully the system won't let your users down. I just a slide to reiterate, really. This is, I recommend you to another book by Charles Perrault. It's quite an old book now. He said he was talking about always blaming the user, and to keep your systems simple. I mean, humans will always get distracted, will always make mistakes, and if you can't demand a better human, then you need to make your systems better. And I think certainly our experience of RI Witness has been that if you keep it simple, you keep your training simple, but accurate, and there's updates and you do competencies, then it's a really good, straightforward system to get installed. There's certainly extra bits to the system that we've not looked at yet. But as I say, we've still got 3 or 4 more installations to do. So it's certainly something that we're looking at to do towards the end of the year, is look at the analytics part of the software. It's recording all of your procedures and all your operators and all your work area use. And you can use that data to maybe just analyze how your workstations are used, for example, or how long a procedure might take, so that you can take that into consideration when you're looking at your workload. It's not something we've looked at too much at the moment. We're certainly hoping to look at. There's also an overview board which will give you, as it says, an overview of all the processes that are happening in the clinic that day and where those processes are up to. Again, we've not done too much work on that at the moment because we're just concentrating on the installations, but was certainly something interesting that we're thinking about looking at. The use of imaging, we have started with the imaging software in 3 of our clinics now, and that we're certainly going to have a look, see how that is helpful to the patients, for example, or helpful to the operator, and maybe roll out to the other clinics. As I mentioned before, there's some traceability improvements, but you can see along there's a pathway of improvements that Cooper have already set out to make different software versions that are going to introduce some really nice features over the next year or so. Yeah, one of those is possibly, maybe for example, having tag readers on your equipment so that you can, you've got traceability of your incubators or your ICSI rigs, for example. And I think there's also a little bit of work that's going to go on around the donor recipient witness matching as well. But yeah, we hope that's been useful, our little insight into the installation process. It's certainly an ongoing project for us at the moment, but we're enjoying it, and we're learning with each installation. We're learning more and more, and we've certainly got really good support from the two specialists, Nathan and Grant, who are literally on the end of the phone or email whenever we need them. So yeah, thank you very much, and we're going to have some questions.
So we've already had a number of questions that have come into the chat box about your experience with the system. So I turn now to the panel, if they'd all like to switch their webcams on. And I think we'll get going straight away with the questions if we can. So first question we've had coming, for those of your clinics who had zero experience of electronic witnessing before you brought in Witness, how did they react to the quite big changes in working practices? Louise?
Well, again, I think going back to the slide where I said, you know, all the staff need different ways of training. I think all the staff have their own way of reacting. I think there's some people that are really excited to be able to use it, really excited to know all the features. There's some embryologists who are a little bit resistant to change. They don't need it. It's the system we've got now is fine. So yeah, I think just as fortunately we'd made this decision to install our Eyewitness, we'd made it as a collaborative group. So we've got a super user in each clinic, and I really rely on them to drive it forward and keep the training going, keep the communication going with the team. I think once people see the system and they get their hands on it and they have a chance to see what it's about and what it can do, it's super easy to use once you actually, it's installed and the process map is right, and you know the technician is used to putting the tags on the dishes, and you know once there's a learning process, and we have manually witnessed alongside the Eyewitness system in all of the clinics until all the staff are happy with it and it's validated and it's being used correctly. I can't really say that there's a kind of one answer really to that question. I think everybody just grasp onto the young ones that are really enthusiastic and understand the technology, and just use them to drag along the old folks like me who really don't understand how it works but love it.
Brilliant, that's great. Steve, I put the same question to you. You've installed our Eyewitness system into a couple of clinics, and how did staff that you work with react to changes in working practices?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Emily. I think I'd agree with what Louise has said to a degree. But I've installed RI Witness into 5 centres in my time. Although that, nothing like the scale of the task that Louise has got to take or is taken on. I think overwhelmingly the response has been positive from embryologists that I've worked with, and I think they find the reassurance that the system provides, together with the fact that because it works pretty much passively, it's not a nuisance to use as such, because the dishes are just recognised when you put them into the work area. The login's easy, that sort of thing. And to be perfectly honest, I've often heard embryologists that I've worked with use the phrase, "This is the best bit of kit we've ever bought," because it makes their life easier. I think that would be my answer to that.
Super. Thank you, Steve. Sally or Austin, have you got anything you'd like to add to that question?
Again, Louise and Steve, I mean, you've said most of it. When I'm going around speaking to labs, there's often 1-2 people who are reluctant to adopt new technology, whether it's for change in working practices or whether it's for cost reasons. But so what we tend to do is we tend to get those people into a clinic where they're using it, so they can see for themselves exactly what Steve just said, how easy it is, how much it's not a nuisance to use, it's easy to use. And I really find I'm definitely work like this, I have to touch it and get hands-on with it to really understand it properly. And I find that lots of people in the labs and in the clinic environment are the same. So, again, if you've got those sort of people who don't fully understand it, and that is probably leading to their reluctance, get them to a clinic and get them hands-on with it, and then they'll really understand it and see the benefits.
Brilliant, thank you. I like the idea of getting them into another clinic so you can see how it's become part of the structure and the fabric of the clinic. That's fabulous. I've got a quick question here, but to the point. What would happen if we forgot to tag a dish? Perhaps Sally and Austin, we come to you first with that one.
Don't know, Sally, do you want to go first with that, or?
If you forgot to tag a dish. Okay, so the way it works, again, this is part of the benefit, the beauty of being in a clinic, and you can test this sort of thing. I think probably as part of our implementation with care with Louise, we did all these tests. What do we do if this happens? So if you don't tag a dish, when you bring it to a work area, to a stereo zoom microscope, basically nothing happens. The system kind of looks at you and says, you can't do anything. You're not allowed to proceed to any next step because you haven't got a dish tag there. Now, the protocol of, once we've trained the staff is you interact with the system, you press the button depending on what technique you're wanting to do. And if you don't have a button to press, then you have not done something properly. So you need to look at what you're presenting to the microscope and work out what is wrong. So basically, if you didn't tag a dish, you couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, anything to add?
Yeah, also, I think if you didn't tag a dish, or if there was a tag failure, which we don't have many of, it would be a case of you would have a manual witnessing step in there. So you would have a separate protocol that you would need to follow. I think, Sally, is that correct? So yeah, your base embryology training comes in, and you would then formulate a manual witnessing process.
Yeah, and that would be part of our the backup plan if for some reason the IT, the network, the electronics, the PC went down, you would fall back to your manual witnessing, albeit very temporarily, hopefully. But I think so on the very rare occasion where you have a tag failure, and that can be caused by incorrectly peeling it off and putting it on, which could break the circuit. Or in some cases, if there's been a spillage of oil, for example, on the stereo zoom, you haven't noticed, you put the dish on it, that can affect it. It can affect kind of the tag on the bottom of the dish as well. Anyway, for whatever reason, if you needed to do a manual override into the system, you can. We call it an admin assign. So generally we set up the super users and the seniors as people who are able to do this admin assign this manual override into the system. But the system also requires, so it lets them do this manual override, but it also requires a reason. And depending on what that reason is inputted as, you might see trends appearing in the system, trends of weak areas or weaknesses in the system. I'm trying to think of an example now. So, it could be simply a case of I need certain things in the work area to be able to proceed to the next step. And if I'm not doing that and I'm pressing the button, I then need somebody else to come in and basically change the name of my dish. So that is simply a question of more training for that member of staff or for the whole team if everybody's making the same mistake. The point is really that the system kind of will pick up these weak areas, these trends, and it will show you how you can improve.
Great. Thank you, Sally. Steve, I'd just like to pick up on something that Sally said there about tag failure rate. In your experience as a user of the system, is that something that you came across often?
No, quite the opposite, actually. Very, very infrequently indeed. I think you could, perhaps count almost on one hand the number of tags that failed in a 12-month period. And as Sally mentioned, the failure is almost always due to the way that the tag has been handled. So if they're not taken carefully off the sheet, if they're bent, if that breaks the aerial, which is a large part of the tag, then it's not going to work. But it's not an issue at all. They hardly ever fail.
Great, thank you for your reassurance on that one. Next question here. We've always been concerned about putting a witness reader on top of a heated work surface. How do your clinics find working on this raised platform? Perhaps Louise, that's something that you've come across, putting the witness system into the number of clinics that you have.
Yeah, we don't install it onto a heated work area. We actually switch off the hood heated element. So obviously the hood still functions, the flow still works, and the light still works if that's what you want to use, and the microscope controls still work, but we've just switched off the heated element. So we don't have any raised retrofitted work areas at all. I know in some of our smaller hoods we've had to raise up the G85 within the hood so that it's not sitting on the RI witness heated stage, but that's been absolutely fine with the hoods that we've had. That's been absolutely workable. I think if it's not workable within your hood, my suggestion would be to replace the hood and just have the integrated work area. But no, I would switch off the heated stage if you can.
Great, thank you. With addressing the specific concern about it being a raised platform, Sally, perhaps that's something that you can comment on in your experience?
Yeah, get it a lot. People are worried, unless they've been using one of those older stereos that have got the large light bases, they're a bit worried about working up a bit higher. But I mean, we find this is what we find. Once they start using it, it's such a large surface that you've got to work with, and actually the real area you're using is very small, and it's very near the center of the field of view of the microscope. So it is something that I find people are concerned about before they start using it, and once they start using it, never. I don't know if Steve has got any comments on that.
Yeah, I'd agree with you entirely, Sally. I think, I mean, clearly a flush-fitted reader is better, you know, in the sense that it's a smooth surface and it's easy to clean, etc., etc. But the reality, as you say, is that, you know, when embryologists are moving things in and out of workstations, they're not flailing their arms around. They're not, you know, they're holding that dish with maximum care. And I've never come across anybody sort of catching a dish on the edge of the plate if it's raised. It just doesn't happen. Embryologists just don't work like that. So I don't think that is a concern. I think people get used to the fact that they're working on a raised plate, which is quite a large raised plate, as Louise showed in some of her photographs. So I don't consider it an issue myself.
Great, thank you. Question here that's come in. We'll come to you first, Louise. I'm in charge of quality in a group in different countries. Do you have any advice for handling the 2 or 3 people across the team who have negative attitudes to the extra cost of electronic witnessing compared to manual witnessing?
Yeah, I think the cost is a consideration. Just a bit of experience about installing it in different countries. Yes, when we installed in Dublin, their regulatory body, HPRA is the HPRA, are very, they've got very different regulations as opposed to the HFEA in this country, and there's a lot more validation. There was a bigger validation exercise that we had to go through to satisfy the use in that country. I think, yeah, so you just have to bear that in mind. I would have just said about the tag damage before. One of the exercises that we had to carry out for the Dublin install was actually to try and not make a tag work. And we pretty much put it through everything that it could come across in use, scratching it in an incubator, on an incubator surface, soaking it with oil. We even soaked it with alcohol, even though we don't use alcohol within the lab. We soaked it with the cleaning products. The only way we could get it not to work was by scratching it with scissors, which we considered was probably not something that would happen within its normal working life. So we were very happy with the robustness of the tags. Just to go back to the previous question. Yes, I mean, compared to manual witnessing, the consumables and, you know, the hardware or extra bits of equipment that you want for the system, it is an extra cost. There's no doubt that. I think it's a decision that you have to make. In terms of efficiency, really, it's just not that efficient to have people just, you know, being distracted by having to witness somebody else, or just being in the lab because somebody might need a witness, waiting to get on to with a procedure because you're waiting for somebody to be able to witness you. It's just not very efficient. And there's extra bits that we're finding with the system, like the traceability, like the stock control. It just depends where you want to spend your money, really. I think that's what it comes down to. It's yeah, I think if you're thinking about quality management, I think it's got to be the way forward in terms of electronic witnessing, electronic traceability, electronic stock control, and all the extra features and things that are going to be implemented. I think it's, you know, it by far and away beats, you know, human recording of things, and all the things that are associated with that, like in Steve's talk. Humans are infallible. We get distracted. We don't set out to misread something or not give something our full attention, but we all know that, you know, sometimes the lighting condition isn't right, or you don't really have the time, or the text is so small, you're struggling to see it. It's just a reassurance for everybody, really, to know that you've got an electronic record of exactly what's happened in your lab. If you're happy with the information that you can see from human witnessing, that's fine, stick with it, but I would encourage them to visit a clinic that already has the system in use and is using to its full capacity, and just seeing the different features that are associated, not just a witnessing system, it has all sorts of extra features that you know, I'm sure you would find beneficial.
Yeah, indeed. Oh.
Yeah.
Thanks, Louise. That's great. I've got a fabulous mental image of you guys doing your robustness tests on the tags there. That's wonderful.
I can't
Steve,
tell you.
Steve, I'm going to come to you next, because you will have been in a situation where you've had to make business cases to put the RI Witness system into different clinics. Perhaps you could give some insight into how you address this issue of costs.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a difficult one in some clinics, because there is a cost associated with having the system, and there's no getting away with that. But in a sense, certainly in the UK, we are in a fortunate position whereby having the need to perform witnessing is mandated. We don't have any choice. So therefore here, it's about doing that in a way that is most efficient and most effective, and the RI Witness system ticks both of those boxes. But you know, there are the other benefits that Louise has covered. Are real benefits. The fact that you can get data about the timing of procedures, you know, the fact that you can use these data in terms of your quality control processes. All of these advantages, whilst they're very difficult to put a price on, you know, are definitely there. And also, you know, there is a time saving, for sure. We did some work when I worked in Liverpool, where we measured the amount of time that was taken to perform witnessing manually. This was for an ICSI cycle, and that came out at about 6.5 minutes. So of an embryologist's time across an ICSI cycle, that compared to 3.5 minutes using the electronic witnessing system. So a difference of 3 minutes isn't huge, but of course, if you multiply that up across a large clinic, or indeed across a large group of clinics like Care Fertility, then those things do become more important. And that doesn't take into account the amount of time when people are manually witnessing that they have to wait for their colleague sitting there going, "Can I have a witness, please? Can I have a witness, please?" You know, so we weren't able to measure that as such.
I think those are great points that you both make. That obviously people are going to ask about costs, but there are many other benefits of the system. Austin and Sally, I'll come to you, because you will obviously experience people asking questions about costs and so on. And I wonder if you've got any ways and means that customers have overcome this potential objection internally.
Yeah, there are a variety of ways that the system can be paid for, and we are open to adapting our payment process, and that can be as a capital purchase with a lower tag price, or a higher tag price, and then you'll purchase your equipment through the tags. Credit sale. We're currently running a deferred payment scheme at the moment, so that we can defer payments, the start of the payments to September, which is very good at the moment, because obviously with cash flow for private clinics during lockdown. So we're open to various plans and ideas, and yeah, to try and help you set up the witness system in your lab.
That's great. Thank you, Austin. And I think if any customers from the UK and Ireland would like to explore those opportunities, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. Sally, have you got anything that you would like to add?
I'll add the opposite, if I may. I had one clinic, not in the UK, who decided, okay, well, we're going to recoup the costs by charging the patients for an extra fee for using the electronic witnessing system. And then we sat down and bashed that thought process through with them. And actually that wouldn't work, because then you're basically giving them an option. You're saying, okay, well, actually, you can choose to have this extra kind of witnessing or not. And if they opted out of it, what would happen in the lab is that you're going to have some dishes which are tagged and some dishes which aren't tagged. So it doesn't work like that. Don't think that you can pass the cost on as a direct extra cost to the patients. Of course you can, you'll just have to kind of just put it into the overall cost. It can't be a separate thing that they can opt in and out of.
That's a great point, Sally. Yeah, thank you for making that.
Just as another thing as well, we can also look at the number of tags you're using and give you an estimate, and look at the actual costs that it would cost to do a witness system for you for, let's say, a per cycle or an IVF patient, and we can give those to you, and actually it doesn't work out to be a great deal.
No, and again, if anyone's watching this and they're interested in that, please do follow up with us afterwards. Got a questionnaire here that's possibly slightly controversial. Do you think having an electronic witnessing system can make staff more complacent? Steve, perhaps we come to you first on this one.
That's a really interesting question. I think there is perhaps a danger of that happening, but I think what is important is that we recognise, and that embryologists, when they're trained to use the system, are trained that it is a secondary witnessing system. It isn't designed to replace their eyes. So the dishes will be labelled in addition to the tag. So I think this is a training issue. I think people need to be, it needs to be made very clear that it is a witnessing system, and it isn't to allow them to never look at a dish again because the machine is doing it for them. I think that would be my answer there.
Great point. Louise, any thoughts on your staff potentially becoming complacent?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely. I'd say I think people get comfortable with it. I'd go right back to the beginning when I was saying that it's your responsibility as a trained scientist, as a professional, to be your own witness, to look at what you're doing. It is your responsibility. If you're moving gametes or embryos, it's your responsibility to check that you're doing the right thing. And this system is just a witness of what you're doing. So, I mean, we've had this sort of time and time again, really, and I'm not being patronising by saying, you know, the younger embryologists have only ever had a witnessing system that is checking their work. They've not had to work anywhere where they've been on their own and been solely responsible for what they're doing. And it just is down to staff education of it's your responsibility to be checking. And I know sometimes you open the incubation door and you expect a dish to be in a certain place, and maybe you just kind of like pick it up without looking at it properly, and it comes into the workstation and it's a mismatch, and that's going to happen. But if you're actually carrying out a procedure, moving things between dishes, and it goes back to the question about the untagged dish, it's your responsibility to carry out that procedure. It's your responsibility to gain a witness for what you've done. That's a regulatory requirement that Steve spoke about, that was introduced by the HFEA. It's your responsibility to get a witness for what you are doing. And whether that's a human witness or an electronic witness, that's just what it is you have to take it very responsibly, and yeah, just staff education as to not fall into that complacency or thinking that the system is there to keep an eye on you. It's just there to witness what you've done. For your reassurance, for the patient reassurance, you know, small things, we're constantly saying, you know, a small little error that you may think is, you know, non-consequential, it was nothing, it was fine. We actually have a very good internal reporting system within care where we report everything, a near miss, a little incident, and we try and learn from that and go forward, because a very small thing that you don't think is very important can cascade through the system and cause, you know, catastrophic consequences of something that you've done that is just perhaps, you know, just to you a small problem. So yeah, I would just, it's education, it's reporting every small thing that you think, oh, this wasn't right, or that didn't work very well, or yes, sometimes somebody, you know, somebody didn't put a tag on the dish. We just keep reporting it, and we just keep reiterating it. It's crucial. It's, you know, it's your job leads on to somebody else's job, leads on ultimately to the patient, and the patient safety and the patient reassurance that everything is done absolutely right.
Great.
So just, yeah, staff education and the constant re-educating and reminding to try and avoid that complacence. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Actually, Emily, Sally and I had a conversation last week actually about putting a witness system into a new clinic would often highlight a number of issues. You may get more alarms earlier on because it highlights some perhaps complacency from manual witnessing or from other systems where the system itself is highlighting issues, as opposed to that's a problem. You just need to go back and look at those SOPs.
Good point. Thank you for that. Let's move on. Just got a couple more questions. How easy was it to get all clinics working in the same way? Louise?
For us, it's what we do. So surprisingly, within the, you know, our group of clinics, surprisingly quite easy. I think so we have got new clinics. We've acquired new clinics since we started into implementing this system, and it's just a matter of comparing your witness maps, comparing the way you work, and as we're integrating them to within the care group and the way we do things, it's a long-term project. It's not something you do overnight. You just gradually compare piece by piece by piece as you're going along to see where the best practice is.
And I guess the
best practice, really, just comparing practices and debating it out, trying one way, trying another way, and then deciding on what's the best practice for you. Yeah, it's not, we haven't found it a major problem, but that's the way we work anyway. So that's been quite straightforward.
I guess with the very high level of standardisation you have in care, that's probably made it easier for you. Sally, Austin, Steve, I don't know if you've got any comments that you can make about, say, a group of clinics trying to work all in the same way with the RI witness system.
Yeah, I guess embryologists are inherently protective of the way that they've developed things within their own clinic, and there is sometimes resistance to change. But what I have seen when we've put RI witness into different clinics and tried to standardise is that there's often a very healthy exchange of good ideas, where one clinic will go, oh, actually, that's a much better way of doing it, and in fact, some of those that sort of exchange of information has come through, you know, through the product specialists that have installed the machines. When the witness point diagrams have been, you know, have been formulated, they've said, "Is this? What about doing it like this?" You know, in a very respectful way. So yeah, again, I don't see it as a huge problem to standardise.
And let me just recall, we installed a system into a big clinic in Korea, and it had 3 different embryology labs all on different floors. So we got the lab manager of each of the labs together so that we could build this witness point diagram, the flow of steps, if you like. And in terms of sperm prep, we couldn't get any one of the labs to agree. They all did it differently, even though they were all supposed to be doing it the same. So they were all like, oh, you do it like that. Oh, you do it like that. Okay. So then we made actually able to standardize, even within one lab, how they were doing something.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'll move on to our last question, and this is a fabulous question. It wins the question not only of the day, but almost of the year award. So, does the panel think if there is an RFID chip in the Oscars envelope that they can prevent the same mistake happening again that happened in the 2018 Oscars? I'm loving it. Just a yay or a nay, I think, from the panel members on this one.
Yeah, I think we could figure something out for them.
We'd have to tag the recipient.
You'd have to tag the recipient. Exactly, Austin.
Super. That's wonderful. So thank you so much. Thank you very much to Louise for speaking for us this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to have you with us, Louise, and hear your experiences. And thank you also to Steve for the introduction and answering the questions. And thank you also to Austin and Sally for being our experts and joining us on the panel this afternoon. And also a huge thank you to everybody who's joined us this lunchtime, whether you're in a clinic or in the lab or at home. Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed the presentations and the questions, and we look forward to seeing you again soon at another one of our webinars. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.